We are recording. So the recordings are in a Slack channel. They may or may not be useful to you, but they're not hurting you. So I'm just going to keep throwing them out there. And if there's specific feedback on how they can be made better, then send me that in a Slack message or something. All right. So today was a little more on functions. So it's more function practice and a little few extra cool things you can do with functions. So today we're going to cover storing functions and variables, something called anonymous functions, providing functions as arguments to other functions, and then recursion. Yeah, what's up? Yeah, the key word is, remember it? Yeah. More? Okay. Dehance. So functions as arguments, and then a little more functions as arguments. So because I know the assignment is there and the studio is there, we might not get through all this, but we'll just work our way through until we end the lecture period. So there's two ways to write a function, and we learned over the last week one way, and that's line 9 through 12. We can write a function that says, I want to multiply by 2, and I give it a parameter, and then I return a value from that function. And just as a refresher, if I want to call that function, I provide these parentheses. And then if I want to pass a parameter into this function, I have to give it something. And so what the code is going to do in line 14, it's going to call multiply by 2. It's going to pass the argument of 4. 4 is going to come in as parameter, and then it's going to return 4 times 2. So if we console log result out, it should just be 8. It's 8, and because we console log in line 10, that's why 4 was there. So there's another way you can declare a function, and it's pretty similar. Just like we assign a string a number, so we assign a string like this, we assign a number like this, we assign a Boolean like this, we can make an array of several things together. A function you can assign to a variable too. So here I'm declaring a variable called multiply by 2. I got something wrong, but that's okay. Here I'm declaring a variable called multiply by 2, and I'm setting it to the function param. So now if I console log multiply by 2, it's going to say, hey, that's a function. This variable that you're printing out, that's a function. It's a function called multiply by 2. And I can do just like my other functions, I can store my value by calling that function. So I can still pass in 4, and what it's going to do is it's going to console log the parameter I passed in, and it's going to return the parameter times 2. So now I'm going to console log my value, and it's going to execute the exact same way as our previous function. So from our purposes, there's no difference in declaring a function this way and declaring a function this way. This function you provided a name over here, and this function you provide a name over here. It's just another way to declare a function. So let's do just an exercise to practice our functions, right? So this is going to be Pig Latin round 2. So we're going to define a function called convert single word. And then I went ahead and wrote the pseudocode, the rules for convert single word. If it begins with a vowel, just give me the word back. If it doesn't, then give me the Pig Latin equivalent. And then the Pig Latin equivalent, I wrote the rules of it right there. So go ahead and take 7 minutes and create a function, convert single word, and test it out on these things and see if it can work. If you have questions, raise your hand. see a few people trying to figure out, like, okay, how do you see if this is a vowel or not? So some people, I've seen one person like make an array of all the vowels and be like, okay, is the first letter in that array? And I've seen some people make this huge if statement. So you still got like 3 minutes left, but I kind of gave what I was thinking starting up on the board for people that are struggling through the very early part of it. All right, this was not an easy problem. You were not expected to get it all the way done. All we want to do is get in the practice of writing more functions, attempting them, and then seeing them written, and get more and more and more repetition, right? So I went ahead and built my function, the big basics of my function like this. So I said, okay, give me a variable and store in it a function. A function that takes in a string and then says, okay, what's the first character? What's the first, what would be a better name here is probably first letter. What's the first letter in the string you give me? And then I'm saying in line 43, if the vowels, which I described earlier, if those vowels include the first letter, then I want to do something. If it doesn't, then it starts with a consonant and I want to do something else. So this basic structure of me making a function and combining it to a variable, now I'm going to go back to my rules and see what I want to do. So if it's a vowel, what do I want to do? No. If it's a vowel, I don't want to print the word, I want to return the word. Slight difference. So if the vowel includes first letter, I want to stop my function here, and I want to say return the whole word. So before I write the consonant, I'm going to test that to make sure. So if I console log apple, it should, according to my rules, return me apple. And it does. It says, yeah, you got apple. I'll put a space between there to make just a little easier. Okay, if it's a consonant, then I wanted to do a whole bunch of other rules. So if the word starts with a vowel, return the word. If it doesn't, else, return the word's Pig Latin equivalent. So the Pig Latin equivalent says move the first letter to the end of the word and add the suffix a. Did anybody come up with a solution for moving the first letter to the end of the word? Yeah.
I just took a slice of the original string, starting with 1, and then added the first character of the original string to the end of it.
So describe that. So
Input string dot slice parentheses 1 plus input string open bracket 0.
okay. Somebody else describe what's actually going on here with this slice method. Yeah.
So in input string.slice at 1, it's taking the word at index 1, which is the second letter, and returning that to the end of the word. And then it adds after that the first letter of the word.
Okay, so if I had caret, and caret came through to here, input string.slice says I'm going to take everything from the A to the T, and then I'm going to add 0, because that's the C. Now, I already defined input string 0. I defined it in line 42. So if I didn't want to repeat myself, I could just say, yeah, let's use that first letter that I already defined up here. And then what else am I supposed to do after that?
Add the suffix.
Add the suffix. So I would do something like this, pig suffix, and I would store it in a variable, and I think it's a, yep. So this isn't really, in line 49, my Pig Latin really isn't this yet until I add on the suffix on the end of it. And then I'm good, right? I can run it. I can console log right here. I can run it, and apple will be apple, and caret should be arete, right? Where?
In the else.
Line
50.
So now, okay, if vowel, I return there. Otherwise, I'm looking at pig. Build my Pig Latin and return my Pig Latin. If I didn't return it in line 52, That's why we were seeing undefined. I didn't say anything like, hey, you should return it. So now I console log them both, and now I have Apple and I have Eric K. And then if I wanted to, I could test these other functions to make that, to see if that works.
It may be fancy, but there is a big lesson for words that start with vowels.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Next class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even actually know if this is exactly what Pig Latin is. It's really just an exercise in building a function. But that would be cool if you build like a Pig Latin library and you can release it on the internet and everybody could use it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. There's a lot of things you could have done. I saw a few people using like a for loop also. So there's a lot of different ways to solve a problem. Yep. Okay. So passing functions as arguments to other functions. So we're not going to comment out lines 39 on my screen through 54. And I'm going to send it on Slack because we're actually going to use it a little later. But for now, we're just going to leave it there. And we're going to talk about passing functions as arguments. So this is a little complex, and just the more and more you do practice with it, it'll get easier. So there's a function called setTimeout. And it's a function available in every world in JavaScript land. It's just there. It's kind of like console log. It's just a function that exists. It's kind of like the addition sign, type of. These functions exist. And what setTimeout does takes two arguments. First argument is a function. Second argument is a time period in milliseconds. And what happens is, after the argument of the time period that you give it, then it's going to execute the function you give it. So we can say set timeout, and I'll delete this again. So we'll talk about it takes two arguments, right? It takes a function, and then it takes a time period. Those are the two things it takes. So the first thing I'm going to give it is a function. I'm going to say, okay, take a function, and all I want you to do is console log, I'm in a function. Pretty simple function. You could do tons of stuff in there, but for now we're just going to do that. Then the second argument that this function takes is a time period. And I'm going to say 2,000. 2,000 milliseconds is how many seconds? Yeah, 2. So I'm going to run. There we go. So what's going to happen is it's going to start this function, and it's going to say, I'm going to wait 2 seconds, and then it's going to execute the function inside of it. You could do whatever you wanted to in that function. You could call convert, you could console log convert single word and pass an apple. But if we pass an apple, we'll return apple because it starts with a vowel. So console log caret. And it should be after 2 seconds. Say what? Yeah, no, it's okay. So it ran through the entire program, waited 2 seconds, and then ran what's inside here. The point of not set timeout, but it's the idea that I actually passed a function to another function. These things that are functions, we can start passing them around to different parts of the program. And the cool thing about storing it as a variable, I can take this entire function and store it as a variable. And I can actually just pass that variable in to set timeout. So I know that step gets a little confusing, but I created a function, stored it in a variable, and then pass that variable in. Wait 2 seconds, print. That's kind of cool. The best way to get practice passing functions to other functions is with arrays. Arrays have a ton of methods. I'm going to comment out lines 66 through 73 and move down to the array section. Tons of functions that take in other functions as parameters. One of them is array.map. Does anybody know what array.map does? Say that again.
It reads the elements of the array in place. You don't have to convert it to a string.
Let's find out. Did you have?
It passes the function to each element in the array. I think.
Kind of. So array.map is a function, and we'll look up what it does right after we execute it. But it's going to take in a function, and now I put in a function that says return 1 times 2. New array. And let's just see what new array is now to try to figure out what array.map is doing. Oh, it returned 2 for everything. So what array.map is doing, it's fundamentally changing the array, and whatever you return out of this new map function takes the place of every single thing in the array. And what you're saying is that's kind of stupid. Why would you ever want to just assign everything to 2? But array.map also takes an argument. It takes, let's just call it x, or let's call it current element. Now, let's do current element times 2. I just doubled every item in that array. So calling this map function, then I pass in a function, and that function always will, it'll go over, the word is iterate, it'll iterate through every item in the array, and then return this new operation, and that'll be your new array. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff you can do here. So this says using array.map, return a new array of square root of each number. So I would have this current element, and I would just multiply it by itself. That should return a square root of each number, 1, 4, 9, 16. Does anybody know the JavaScript shorthand for squared? That's another way of squaring. What else can we do? Let's see. Array.filter, that's a really good one. Array.filter also takes a function, and it also returns an array. It also iterates over an entire array. So let's see what this one does. Element, return element is less than or equal to 3. Does anybody have a guess at what filter is going to do?
Only return those that meet that.
Yeah, it's going to go through this entire array, applying this function. And whenever this function is true, it's going to keep it. If it's not true, it's going to ditch it. So we should see a new array. We should see a new array of 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And whatever this filter function is, if it's just less than 3, we should see a new array of 1 and 2. So that's kind of cool. Filter's pretty cool. For each. Oh man, this would be so nice if you had done this, if you knew this before your assignment. For each is awesome. You can do array.forEach. And just like the word, so I'm still going to give it a function. It's just going to execute for each one of those things that happens. So it's not returning, it's not doing anything, it's not filtering or mapping. It's just something that's going to execute for each item in that array. So what's kind of cool about this stuff now, we can do it on more than just numbers. We can say, hey, I have this words array, lowercase each word. Does anybody have an idea of which of those operators we could use to lowercase each one?
Two lowercase.
So that's what we're going to apply on it, right? So if we had to say function my lowercase function, you would say I want a dot lowercase. But which of the array methods that I mentioned here, map, filter, or for each, could you use to lowercase every single word? Let's try. I heard for each first, so let's try it. How would you do it? We have for each function, and we would say console log word dot to lowercase. And that should lowercase each one of those words. Luckily, most of them are lowercase, but it did lowercase the first one. Just to make sure it works, we could do the same thing with uppercase, right? But we just printed it out. We didn't actually create a new array or store them anywheres. We just printed it out. So for each is really good when you want to do just like printing or doing something, but you don't care about what it returns. When we care about what it returns, we want to use map. So it's going to be the same function, but we're going to switch it around and use map. So uppercase words equals words map. Console log uppercase words. This should fail. Yeah. Wait, so it did print it out, but it didn't store it. Yes, I'm console logging. So within map, we still have to say, okay, I want to return the uppercased version. And then it's going through every single word, right? It went through hello, uppercased it, returned it. There, uppercased it, returned it. Hello there, amigo, how's it going? There's a ton of these methods, and they're pretty cool. So our last exercise of the day is to use that pig Latin function, and you didn't see that. Convert all the words defined below. You can choose whichever method you'd like. But, so here's your array, and do words dot a function, and then pass in your pig Latin function, and see if you can get a result that converts them all. And then here should be the result of the conversion. So go ahead and do that. You got 2 minutes. And I would suggest using .map. But if you use .map and figure it out, then try something else. Try for each. Try filter, only if they start with a constant. And if you didn't have that pig Latin function, I think I put it in Slack. Let me check though. Yeah. All right, does anybody want to say how we did it? Which of the functions did we find most useful? I think map. Yeah? I like it too. So we could call these pig Latin words, and we could do words dot map. And then what did someone write here? So we have a function. We pass in a word to that function. Individual pig Latin word equals convert single word. And then we just have to make sure we return that individual pig Latin word. And let's see if we actually were able to convert them. Yeah, so we converted them all. So we called .map. We gave it a function. Within that function, we returned a new word. We did it by calling a new function. What's it called when you give it a function and that function doesn't have a name? Like, we didn't really name this function. Yeah, that's your anonymous function. So the more and more advanced you get in JavaScript, you start seeing a lot of anonymous functions. Did anyone figure out a slightly cleaner way to do this than what I did? Anybody? I think I heard you yell it out, so that's why I'm not calling on you. I heard you the first time. What was yours?
I just put words.map and then convert single word.
Yeah, because what we're doing here is we're providing it a function, right? When we give words.map, we're saying, hey, here is a function. This is an argument that we want to paste in there that will execute. So we could just give it our convert single word function. And then that's almost the same thing as taking all this code up here and pasting it in there. As long as our input to this function is also a single word, a single string. So let's see if that works. Yeah, it does. So there was no right or wrong answer there. A lot of people will do it this way, where they'll like explicitly say it out. And I think that's the way most people did it. But you can just pass that function in directly too. Around functions and around maybe these methods on arrays, before we break into Studio, are there any questions around like function syntax or passing in arguments? Yeah.
So, kind of a big question, but I'm not sure when we're doing all this with functions, when they have parameters, when they don't have like the parentheses at the end. Because when we just had the convert single word up there, we didn't have parentheses after it.
Yeah.
And when we put in an anonymous function like that, we do. So
Okay.
why?
So, that's a good question. The parentheses on this anonymous function are in the declaration of the function, right? But if we call convert single word, we've already used those parentheses up here to declare the function. So we've already declared the function. Now once a function is declared, so let my func equals function input console log input. Once a function is declared, how do you execute it? With more parentheses, right? So because we already declared convert single word up top, if we were to convert single word here, it's going to try to call that function. You're not just supplying it as a parameter, it's trying to actually call it. And so it's going to execute, and then whatever is the end of its execution, it's going to reply, that's going to be the new parameter to words.map. That's a pretty confusing explanation, but that's like what's going on. Yeah, in the back.
So you wrote that big Latin words function explicitly calling the words array that you find above.
Yeah.
Did you write it in a way to use a general array, so like you use any array of strings,
Yes, so I'm going to clarify one thing. This Pig Latin words is not a function. If I console log the type of it, it should be an array. Well, return my code to what it was, and I console log the type of it. Oh, it's an object. So it's not a function. It's not a function because words.map is actually returning a new array. Now, your overall question, if you did want to make a function that iterated on any group of words, could you do that? And I could. I could call it with this function syntax. Convert whole array doesn't matter the array. Now, what would be the input to that function? Yeah, it'd be an array. Not words. I'm not going to say it's words automatically. It's just going to be an array. And then within convert whole array, it doesn't matter the array. I would say array.map, and then I would still give it that function and say for every single word or for every single element within this new array you gave me, return convert single word and give it that element. So this would be me declaring a huge function that takes any array of any type of strings and maps over them and changes them into Pig Latin. But I still haven't called it, right? I just declared it. So then I would still have to, well, I could do it here, right? I could do Pig Latin words, and I could use that new method. Convert whole array doesn't matter. Most people try to keep their variable names short. And I could pass in words. And then passing in words now becomes R, and then I r.map. I have to return from this outside function also. I console log the type of it. Yeah, and there's my array.
Wait, why are we returning twice? Never mind.
Yeah, it gets a little nested. And that's why when you start building a whole bunch of functions like that, because in line 87, it's returning the function here. In line 86, it's returning out of the entire function here. Thanks to that question, that's maybe a good bit more complicated than you're going to see in today's studio, but that's a good way to end our studio, or our lecture. Any last questions? Yeah, one last one.
So the return is the input for the second function there, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Bye.
Is it normal to put that closing parenthesis like statically after the bracket like that? Because normally you do the tab like where you have that bracket. I'm sorry, that parenthesis.
Yeah, well, that's specifically for map, right?
Right.
It's taking a whole function.
I guess there isn't any other way you do that.
Nah.
Okay.
Because I would also, if I wanted to store this function somewhere else.
Right.
Well, if I did convert single word, that would just live there like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So returning doesn't end that stuff, like
It doesn't end the whole thing. It only ends the piece that it's inside.
okay.
So in this specific case, I'm inside two pieces. You see two functions? So the first return only ends the piece that I'm in first. And then the second return ends that piece.
Oh, now so return is so it's really going. This is sort of in a way. This is the first return, and then that's the second. Okay.
Yes. It's like going from the inside out
Okay.
instead of the outside in.
Okay.
Almost, yeah. So this executes, this finishes up, then after that all finishes up, then I return the whole thing.
Okay. Also, I was looking ahead at the next assignment, and I think that there's a typo.
Oh yeah?
That I don't know if it's a typo or if it's a
Do you have it?
possibly.
Not another one bites
Yeah. Okay. So in Scrabble, when we're talking about
Oh, I'll keep it right here and I'll announce it.
old score key, make it better, new score key, examples of the new key storage. It's saying me is worth 1, J is worth 8, and K is worth 10. So in reading this, are we making a new scoring system or a new storage system? And because K should be worth 5. But I
Yeah.
also didn't know if that was a typo or if
No, it looks like a typo. It looks like K should be worth 5.
5
Right?
or you should be putting Q or Z in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Yeah, good clarification. You're right. Hey, I got a phone. Make sure you didn't lose your phone. If you did lose it, come on up.
Excuse me.
What's up?
I'm Ronald. I'm from the daytime class, but I'm going to be switching over to nighttime. As wintertime. But I was trying to figure out which group was.
Was yours?
Yeah.
Terrence is that guy
I mean, I know Terrence.
right there, and his group is at that back table right there.
This one in the middle.
Yeah, like the not right there in the middle, but like against the wall in the middle.
I got you. Appreciate it.
What's your name?
Ron.
Will.
Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you.